step alive?
I don't care. They know I'm stepping. Step up for Jesus. We'll make a song out of it. Stepping for the Lord. Everybody stepping for the Lord. I got, I'm at 20,000, yay. That gives me my
Oh man, I have 11,055.
11,055.
I guess I'll have to keep stepping up here to catch up with you.
I'm at 8.10 miles. 8.1 miles.
That's nothing, I'm at 23.
Yeah, but you cheat.
I did not.
You cheat. You knit.
I didn't knit
5.23
today.
miles.
Hi there. Welcome to Michigan HaShofar to our Tuesday night Bible study at 7:30. We always start on time. And tonight we have a special guest speaker tonight to teach the class. But just remember, next week, what do we start next week?
Experiencing God.
Experiencing God, exactly. So the books are in, and when you come next week, we'll give you your books, and we'll have the first class next week.
Cindy will call.
Hi, Cindy. Other Cindy, not your Cindy, this Cindy. If you're online, please send us a note, say hi, do something so that we know you're online, and Deanna can record your attendance for Bible class. And tonight we're going to talk about evolution versus creation. We all know evolution is true, right? Okay, I just want to make sure you're paying attention. Huh? Things do evolve, like our society. No, our society is devolving. That's another story. But anyway, Dr. Todd Peterson, who has his PhD in plant physiology from Rhode Island University, is going to lead our discussion tonight and our teaching tonight. So without further ado, would you please give him a warm Michigan welcome?
Thank you. So, a couple words before we start. I hope you're all having a happy Passover season, and shalom to all. My wife has helped to arrange some 12 seders for this season. If you'd like to attend one, you'll need a ticket to Air New Zealand.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyways, that's 9,000 miles away. So, I am aware that not everyone is a scientist, and I don't want to snowball this into a lot of technical jargon. So I'm going to try to use as plain a language approach as I possibly can. I might sort of tone down some things. You might have a question. You may be aware of some of these things. But I really want to have some basic themes come through. So first of all, I'm using the word perspectives. Yes, you can get creation and evolution as counterparts in the story. One part of this is a theme I'm going to be weaving in, and that's about apologetics. And for that, we're going to have an interface between science and faith, and I'll talk about conferences and my gaining perspectives through that venue. I use this picture. This is out here. This is ocean water, and this is a salt marsh. And being on the East Coast, you've probably all driven along the coast and seen salt marshes. Mm-hmm. And these are Spartina plants. And the thing that's interesting about when I took a marine botany class at Boston University as a senior in college, the professor came out and he says, well, the salt water comes in a tidal marsh through a tidal creek. In comes the incoming tide. But if it's been raining, water from the mainland, fresh water's coming down. Mm-hmm. So you have salt water hitting fresh water. And he says at that interface you have mixing, and it's very productive biologically and ecologically. So our science and faith interaction is that mixing zone, and we're going to bring themes together. And the one key theme that will be coming through tonight is intelligent design, and I'll keep coming back to what that is. And I've got an example to show you. Actually, we're going to hit a couple of examples related to intelligent design. But I really want this message to be personal. You want a personal relationship with God, then you need to know that there's something personally that He's created that's in every one of us. And it has to do with energy. The example I give at the end has to be operational. Otherwise, you wouldn't be seeing me. You wouldn't be hearing me. You wouldn't be digesting that thing you're drinking. There's something about energy that's in this theme that brings it all together. So I know a lot of people in MishCon time don't really know my background or know me all that well. So I'm gonna go quick, give you an introduction. In my grade school years, I went to Sunday school classes, but then in high school and college, I really didn't go to church or read the Bible. In my graduate studies at the University of Rhode Island, I had a couple of friends. One of them was I think he might have been Lutheran, another was a non-believer, and we got together and we talked for a while. So we were all in the botany department there, but then I started interested in going back to church, and Jim Wolfe said, oh, there's this book by Hal Lindsey you need to read. So there's a New World Coming. Hal Lindsey's pretty well known for a number of other titles, but this is a study of Revelation. Now you have to understand that as a scientist, I like to see how things integrate and come together. And Lindsey really made a point of the information from Daniel goes to Revelation, the information from Revelation goes back to Daniel. And I'm going to talk about information as data. And so to me, the data started to merge. I go, oh, well, now that's interesting. In fact, I look at the whole Bible as a network of information. I did a few things scientific on the way. I was a science research technician, and I'll show you a machine later in this talk that I used. I was a technician at the Harvard Medical School. I was in the neuroscience department, and my boss was this nice little Jewish guy who was the head of the department of the Harvard Medical School neuroscience department. And it was a real privilege for me to work with him. I've been a PhD researcher in agriculture. I don't want to go off on all the stories there, but 2 different positions for at least 2 years in each, one in California and one here in Maryland. I've been a university lecturer. I taught botany, cell biology, and plant anatomy. That was over 2 years of time. I've attended symposia and conferences on science and faith. That ties into intelligent design, and I'll give you a few of the titles of those conferences later. I've also developed a website because I was just interested in apologetics and getting perspectives out there, and I'll touch briefly on what that is a little later. I've worked in the private and the public sector. Right now I'm working for a government, and human health and environment is the theme of our work. And along the way, I met this Jewish guy who turns out to be a congregation leader of a Messianic congregation, and so I've gained a Messianic foundation to my scriptural appreciation, and I've been blessed with 2 tours, one in 1996 to Israel, and then recently with Mishkan folks, we went to Israel in 2018. I visited my friend in New Zealand in 2016, but then I went back in 2020, and I helped with videos and some other support work for the ministry there, Celebrate Messiah New Zealand.
You got a wife.
And I got a wife. Yeah, that's a whole other story, isn't it? So thank you for tying the knot, Bobby. So again, the themes for tonight are perspectives, and we'll tie some of those together. Apologetics is a sub-theme, I'll bring that out, and intelligent design. So I'm going to keep using some keywords over and over again. Data, evidence, objectivity, complexity, specificity, and information. If you have complex, specific information, that can be bits of information you call data. If you take the data and you link it together, you can get an understanding of something. And if you're objective about looking at that data, you can get some reality and some truth out of what you're looking at. And I look at science and Bible both having data, bits of information that you can put together for a larger story. There are additional terms we'll run into: material naturalism, evolution, fine-tuning, and design. And I'll say right up front, material naturalism, a lot of scientists are material naturalists, and it's not just a practice in science, it is their religion, okay? There are a lot of scientists who are beyond material naturalism, and those are some that I've run into that are believers. We'll touch on an evolution. I'll give you an example of fine-tuning, and design as a term we'll just keep coming back to. So we could go often in a lot of different directions, and some of them, as our dear brother Mark mentioned, was something to do about time. I'm going to go with timeless evidence tonight, and there's a reason why. I read a lot of readings about old Earth, young Earth, blah, blah, blah. We'll touch on that. But I wanted to see evidence that was just right here in front of us. You didn't have to have time to be a part of the story. And that's what the evidence I'm going to be relating to you at the end. So we're going to use an example from science that points to a design and designer, and it'll be a molecular machine. I want you to know that it's going to be a molecular machine. And by the way, before I go on, I want to make certain that you understand that my attitude towards science is there are a lot of things that are reliable, things that are sort of unreliable, gone off target. There are scientists who work and they will autocorrect. So there is one element of time, and that is technological advances or honing down our view on things and correcting views that may be off target. If you have good information and you're providing an apologetic, we defend our faith because when we go into scripture, we try to explain that to people and we give a reasoned argument and we can then support, say, religious doctrine. Really simply, apologetics is a defense based on information that's truthful and factual. And an apologetic can also be for a business practice. It can be for, various other things, but an apologetic in a religious sense is to defend our faith. So what are some of the perspectives I've gained over time that lend themselves to both the apologetic studies and the missions work that I've done? So back in sort of the mid-1990s, McLean Bible Church had a study group called the Log College. And they had a number of courses, and I took the apologetics course. I think it was like 10 weeks, one evening a week for 10 weeks. And then it ended with a weekend seminar by an apologist, Norman Geisler. And I'll mention him again in a moment. The congregation leader I told you about a couple decades ago, the Jewish guy, he recommended a book by Reasons to Believe. The CEO, the leader of that is Dr. Hugh Ross. But the book Fingerprint of God talks about all the different models of the universe and which ones are viable, which ones aren't. And he comes to a conclusion about that, and then he relates that to being God's fingerprint. So that was an early apologetics book for me. But I got more involved with the Discovery Institute and their authors and their symposia, and I'll talk about that a little bit. That's science and faith conferences. Then, to me, I was always interested in the idea of natural revelation. They talk about the book of nature. There have to be examples that really speak of God through nature to us. And I think people are blinded. The more I look at science journals and I look at the technicalities and just the incredible nature of what I'm reading, I'm going like, this ain't simple. This ain't random. This is by design. So there's more natural revelation than I think people think. And of course, sharing the gospel with Jewish persons, the Israelis who visit the facilities in New Zealand get a chance to have the gospel shared. And a Messianic congregation, we're always aware of those verses in the Bible that should speak to a Jewish person as well as a Gentile. Now, if we want to defend what's in the Bible, the verses of the Bible, unfortunately, when I looked up Norman Geisler, I was sad to see that he had passed away in 2019. But the reason I mention him is he's strictly, basically, a scriptural Bible defender. That apologetic. I'm going to be giving something from the perspective of science. He's doing it from the Bible. And after going to his seminar at McLean Bible Church, I went ahead and got When Skeptics Ask and When Critics Ask. But he's written or been a co-author up to 90 books. So he's been very active. The webpage I developed starting in the late 90s, 97 I think was the first year. I call it The Window View, Science and Scripture in Harmony. And this is the homepage, and sort of a little bit down, evidence viewed from multiple perspectives, scientific, theological, historical, maybe other perspectives, if examined carefully, reveals the single most important choice we have to make, and that's your faith choice. I could talk about this for a long time, but I'll leave you to visit if you want. By the way, the website hasn't been worked on for about 5 or 6 years, and I really desperately need to take some material out and replace it with up-to-date stuff. And Nita and I have already worked on a couple of articles for the science side, and we're going to go into the Harmony side, which is the biblical, Jewish Messianic biblical side, and add some content there. With regard to natural revelation, well, if you're in New Zealand, you can see a view like that. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. And I've sort of highlighted C, to be in the present tense, what has been made, and that's what we're going to do. And if we do that, then we have evidence that we can see for design in the material and natural world that points to an intelligence that transcends and is ultimately the origin of all. And that allows us and helps us to recognize a relationship for all those who have eyes and minds to see. Those who can see and hear have a chance to have a relationship with our God. So let's look at all of humanity. All of humanity up here, we all have access to information. We all have access to experience. So enter through the narrow gate, because the gate is wide, that is the way, and is the way spacious that leads to destruction, and there are many who enter through it. Excuse me, I'm misquoting that. But the gate is narrow and the way is difficult that leads to life, and there are few who find it. So in my walk in science, I've met many who are on the wide way. They just can't accept that there is a God. And yet, through the Science and Faith Symposia and conferences, I meet people who have run into a relationship with, well, they call him Jesus, and I call him Yeshua, but they'll end up going through that narrow gate and having an eternal life with Adonai. So there are people on both sides. Now, on the web page, I put up a little model for information, and databases can help frame a larger picture. And what I want to say is, when I say science, I'm not saying scientists, okay? When I say theology, I'm not saying theologians. When I'm saying history, I'm talking about just those events in history, not how historians may interpret it, or archaeology and paleontology, what we dig up as evidence. Archaeology relates to what we have in theology and history. Science can look at some of the information that's dug up and relate to history. But when I say science, I'm talking about the data, the information. When I talk about theology, I'm talking about the information like what's in the Bible. Because you know there are things like interpretations, there's bias, there's assumptions. So I'm trying to pare it down a little bit. So again, data, pieces of information go in each of these databases. You place them in that place to hold that information. You pull it together, you get some evidence. And if you're really objective in your perspectives, then you can build a clear understanding. Now, it's been a while, a couple decades maybe, but I used to watch PBS, and I love this series. James Burke is the host of, there's a season 1 and season 2. This is called Connections, TV episodes. And what he does is he starts with social and scientific related developments. Every episode of the show starts in one place in history and with, say, some kind of concept or invention, and it ends up in a much more up-to-date result. And some of the stories are really crazy. So like in season 2 episode, Bright Ideas, it starts out with a man in Baltimore inventing a bottle, which leads to razors, which leads to clock springs, which leads to the Hubble telescope. And you go like, how does that work? When he tells the story, you follow it along, and it does make sense. But it just says that somehow science and minds invent things, and we have advancements over time. So he's charting historical developments in all areas of the human experience, including science and theology, because that's what we're wrapping in today. Some of those things are on target, and some aren't. So consider Darwin's evolution. I actually consider that Darwin's proposal, okay? And he's not on target. Replacement theology, as we've had a witness here. Some people have gone off on a tangent thinking that Israel isn't really in the final view. It's the church. Well, they're wrong. What happens? Science brings in data to correct what's been taught about evolution. Theology, if we really get a good Bible study, you realize replacement theology doesn't work in the long run. So we need that objectivity to go forward. Now, I'm just going to take a moment to mention some of the titles and the dates for the conferences I've been to. The first one was in November of 2000. I went up to the Yale University campus. The law school allowed their space to be used. Actually, it was a student association called Rivendell something or other, and they wanted the conference there, and so they hosted it. Science and Evidence for Design in the Universe. I really didn't understand intelligent design There were 8 main speakers and about 30 other breakout sessions. So there was a lot to listen to. It was very good. In 2004, a friend of mine from NIH, also a Jew and Messianic believer, he and I flew out to Los Angeles on the Biola University campus for 3 days, Intelligent Design and the Future of Science. And I heard some more of the speakers I had heard in 2000, updating and bringing themes together. Very interesting. The more recent conferences I attend, now there's an annual conference. Westminster Theological Seminary is located outside of Philadelphia, so it's easy to get to Pennsylvania from here. Usually it's a Friday night and a Saturday conference. And Westminster Theological Seminary with Discovery Institute, you have seminary speakers speaking on theology, and sometimes it spills over into science-related themes. And then Discovery Institute speakers or invited speakers are on the science side, and they will come back over to the theology side slightly. So one of the first ones was Science and Faith, Friends or Foes? Are we mixing? Are we getting some good productivity? Science and Evidence for Design and Nature was another set of themes. And so then I was getting specifics on intelligent design. But again, the seminary speakers are talking about theology, science, and apologetics. In fact, there's one guy who seems to come every year, and he's always giving a talk on apologetics. So recently, Discovery Institute recommended a book by Dr. Heaton. He is a professor at Ball State University, but you may know Taylor University or Biola University, Christian universities. So he's taught at all 3 institutions, and he had a senior class honors seminar called Boundaries in Science. And his book says, Canceled Science, What Some Atheists Don't Want You to See. And I'm going to quote something from page 30. This seminar was going from year to year, and what he did was he had a lot of information sources, a lot of science. He's a physicist and has an astronomy background, and he's touching on fine-tuning. There was an atheist group that came into the campus because Ball State is a public university, and they wanted him to discontinue the class. And they put so much pressure on him, he ultimately did. But because science is the study of our natural world, we all have that world in common. We all live in the same universe, and the laws of nature affect us all the same, whether we believe in them or not, and whether we are aware of them or not. The common ground of nature is a starting point that includes everyone, like my diagram of the 2 pathways earlier. And his honor class really focused in a lot about fine-tuning. So a couple weekends ago, my wife and I attended a Science and Faith conference in Dallas. Well, actually, we were home online. And there were 5 speakers, and there was a question and answer period. And in that, there was this. Let's see if it plays.
We had a lot of questions relating just to specifically intelligent design. The first one from Larry from New York. Of all the proofs for an intelligent designer, which are the strongest or easiest for the general person to see and understand? And anyone could weigh in on this.
John, the greatest evidence we have is our planet. I love it because you look at Earth, so many conditions that are necessary for life to survive here, to be able to develop on our planet. So we have a UV layer that protects us from the ozone layer that protects us from the UV radiation from the sun. We have the right atmosphere with nitrogen and oxygen in the right proportion. We have lightning that transforms nitrogen, molecular nitrogen into ammonia. We have this, the shield, the magnetic shield that deviates the radiation from the sun and protects life. I was counting the other day. I plan to write a book on that. It's more than 1,000. It's more than 1,000 unique features of our planet that allows life to survive here. So how come that a planet has so many unique properties that we don't find in any other planet? You know, we just got to Mars, and people were showing pictures from Mars. So I have to ask people who on Earth is willing to move to Mars and to live there. I'm not. The planet that we live is much better. It's much more suited for life than any other planet that we know or we even will discover in the future. So the unique properties of life, I think, is the strongest evidence that somebody was predicting everything that was needed. With his ability of foresight, he was planning to have a planet with many features that would allow life here to be created and to persist for many generations.
So Dr. Eberlin turns out to be, he's a highly published scientist. He's also a head of a group in Brazil that is facilitating the understanding of intelligent design there, and they have quite a following, actually. There's another thing that Dr. Eberlin said later when they were asked about faith. He says he doesn't believe there's a God, and I agree with him. He said, I know there's a God.
I always had to get the sheep hook.
Yeah, and the other thing is, what he just told you as examples, it's actually a very small list, and the list really is large. I have an earlier video on my website where they list 20 different factors about the Earth, and they do the math, and the probability is 1 in this big long number. You know, you have a greater chance of winning the lottery than this Earth being what it is. It's just amazing. So anyways, yeah, so he spoke on his book, Foresight. He's talking about God's foresight and intelligent design. So the theme about God is really the author of all. He's the author of spirituality and Bible reality. He's also the author of nature, universe, and life. So, you know, this is where the fresh water meets the salt water, and it mixes. The reality is all God in that mix. So let's go back to Dr. Heaton for a moment, and let's go back to the idea of apologetics. In that conference, they were asking all the speakers, you know, what they would do for apologetics and stuff, and they all came down to one conclusion: ask questions of people. So what does Dr. Heaton do? He asks his honors class, what is the meaning of your existence or the purpose of your life? That gets people thinking. What question would you like most answered? How do we know what we know? What is reality? Why is there something rather than nothing? What has science revealed about the universe? And in his book, he talks about the seniors. Some of them are Christians. Some of them never thought about religion. Some are Muslims. Some are atheists. And one of the comments I thought was interesting was after class, he realized there were 2 guys that were avowed atheists, and they kept walking with him across campus after class, you know. Like, can we ask you another question? So getting people to think, and the science evidence that they were looking at really got them to expand their horizons and think. And of course, some were saying, well, you know, got to think about God in all of this. So he did that. Going back to what is natural, again, God placed us on a material stage. And day-to-day life requires material and natural inputs. I know you need a house, you need food, you need clothing, you know, that's just the material reality of who we are. Now, a common science view is that nature has an explanation for everything. There is no need for a God or gods or a God of the Bible. And that's what material naturalists tend to think. And if they're atheists or skeptics, they think this way. But tonight, and what I've been appreciating over time, is there's another science view, and objective data points to another explanation. And it's really an apologetic based on really some amazing scientific evidence. Again, it takes development over time. I want to go back to a parallel in Scripture and bring that out as well. From 2 Timothy, remind them that of these things, charging them before the Lord, not to strive about words of no profit, to the ruin of the hearers. Be diligent to present yourself approved to God, a worker who does not need to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. But shun profane and idle babblings, for they will increase to more ungodliness. and their message will spread like cancer. Hymenaeus and Philetus are of this sort, who have strayed concerning the truth, saying that the resurrection is already past, and they overthrow the faith of some. So there are always those naysayers, those people that would lead people astray. And when I think about not being ashamed, I think about the science speakers at the Science and Faith conferences. They're not ashamed to get out there and try to promote the idea that intelligent design needs a designer and a mind, and that, of course, leads, obviously, to the conclusion that they're talking about God. They can't be ashamed to do that. And they've been trying to do that in the secular sphere. They first wanted to do it without mentioning God, and they got criticized for that. But really, to get it out into public schools and things, that's a battle, and they've been willing to fight that. But strive not to promote words of no profit. It really means you have to go back to data and being objective. So what's quoted by a lot of people in a lot of different ways is to test all things, hold fast what is good. Another version of the 1 Thessalonians 5:21 is prove all things and hold fast what is good. But I like this version the best. But examine everything carefully, hold fast what is good. Because examining means that you're thinking about what you're doing, not just testing. So how? Be not subjective, gather perspectives and data, and be objective, and then move forward. So, we have come to a point where I do want to recognize that there are those who are looking at the time-based perspectives, a young Earth and an old Earth. There's also another perspective that I think is rather interesting that combines some of that thinking. There is a Jewish physicist who talks about Einstein's relativity and how you might be able to look at time. And you might be curious about that. That's another talk. The timeless perspective is using cutting-edge science and current data. Cutting-edge science is going to be some of the molecular biology that gets us to describe that molecular machine. And the evidence for intelligent design leads us to those things that you cannot reduce. It has to be all there to be functional, or it doesn't work. It's irreducibly complex, and I'll give you an example of that. And by the way, to get something that's irreducibly complex, you have to have some pretty fancy information. And we all have some pretty incredible information inside of us. It's that DNA, the genetics, and it's a code, and it's highly specific. And if it wasn't that complex and specific, well, you wouldn't be here tonight. A couple of the books by one of the intelligent design proponents, Stephen Meyer, Darwin's Doubt and Signature in the Cell. This came out first. He talks about DNA and the code and how specific and complex it is. And that leads to design in the complex code. The other book talks about design in organisms and the body plans. If you want a simple example, just think of an elephant. Its architecture, its body plan is different from yours. And the information that generates an elephant is different from us, but it's specific, and it's different from a worm, different from a snake, different from a fish. And you start to think about all those differences and how specificity of that information has to be, and no one knows where the information came from except for you guys. The molecular machine that I'm going to refer to, this is the diagram of it, and I'll give you kind of a tour of it, but I want you to understand that it has, these colors show that those are different parts, and each one of them is an individual or a group of proteins. But I'm going to animate it so you can see it working, and when you see that, that really brings the message home, that it's not just some static thing. Where did intelligent design, the concept, first come from? Well, if you go back into the Greek philosophers, way back when, they talked about design in the universe. They had some concept of design, but they weren't thinking down to the more discrete level. Well, this is William Paley. I think he's Scottish, and he wrote a writing in 1809, Natural Theology or Evidence of the Existence and Attributes of the Deity. And I'll give you a quote from his writing. There were other people, I thought I was going to go down here first. I was just going to mention there were other theologians who had science interests back in the early 1800s, and they also wrote about design and nature as well. But William Paley's talking about, in crossing a heath, suppose I pitched my foot across a stone. And you can just imagine walking along and you kick a stone with your foot, and you look at the stone and nothing very special about it. But suppose I found a watch upon the ground. Suppose William Paley found a watch and he had never seen one before. And he picks it up and he looks at it. And he opens it up and this is what he sees. So he examines the watch and its inner works. And this is what he's trying to portray, is that there's some specific set of gears with teeth and pinions and a spring. It's irreducible. Why? Because if you take one gear out, the watch doesn't work. It won't tell time. It's complex and its structure relates to function. And all of this relationship here applies to the molecular machine I'm going to show you later on in more detail. So close look, and there is this inference that you needed an intelligence, a mind, to design that. Well, that's not so hard, because you think later on you'll learn, well, human beings designed it and put it together. Did a human being design Mark and put him together?
No.
Okay. Not random and not by chance. Mark is not random and not by chance. All the parts need to be dependably there in the watch to tell time. And by the way, I'm not random either. So, Darwin in the mid-1800s, after Paley, and I'm just going to summarize very generally, okay? I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about evolution. But when he started his concept, his proposal about evolution, he didn't account for information in life. He didn't account for the first origin of life. He just started with, there was life, and he was aware of William Paley's writing, and that bothered him. He talks about evolution as change over time, and if you want to use the word evolution, we started an early business, and we sell 10 products this year and 1,000 next year. Our business is evolving. And there is some evidence within species for a little bit of change over time. That's called microevolution. But it's not this stepwise development from one kind of organism to another. And natural selection is what he proposes. Nature does the selection, and that means if you have some variety appearing in organisms, survival of the fittest will determine which ones will move forward, and the ones that don't make it, well, they're out of the picture. So here's a simple example. A flock of sheep. You go out into the field and you see some sheep with a thicker coat and some with thinner coats. And you're in an environment where you're in the northern latitudes, you know it's going to be a harsh winter coming up. And you're going to say, okay, we're going to say these sheep with a thicker coat, they're going to survive, and because nature's going to select against those with a thinner coat, they're not going to be around. Go back 5 years later, what do you see in the field? Thicker and thinner coats. There are other examples he used with pigeon breeding and dog breeding, and the changes over time. But you know what determined the pedigrees of dogs? A human mind. And the differences in pigeons? Human minds. So, evolution is an unguided process, according to his proposal, and nature has no mind. Therefore, Darwin's evolution, his proposal, really is more like trial and error. Now, I did read this book by Dr. Denton. In 1986, a British-Australian biochemist, he's also a medical doctor, published a book that examined a number of facets of what many scientists in science consider support for Darwinian's evolution. But in every chapter and every example, he really, and he's objective. He's going like, does this work? Does it not work? Oh, there's numerous problems identified. And this book really inspired a lot of those folks who were in the Discovery Institute who are looking at intelligent design, because these chapters really bring out some very interesting things. So he inspired many scientists to take a second look at what was commonly accepted as fact and evolution, and also got them to look at scientific evidence that leads to an update and a new perspective on life, and that really is design. Now, to get you to think about that molecular machine and where it is, I drew this quote out from the book. Dr. Denton makes this analogy for a cell, and he says, protein molecules are the ultimate stuff of life. If we think of the cell as being analogous to a factory, then the proteins can be thought of as analogous to machines on the factory floor, which carry out individually or in groups all the essential activities on which the life of the cell depends. Each protein is a sort of miniaturized machine, so small that it must be magnified 1,000,000 times before it is visible to the human eye. The structure and function of these fascinating workhorses of the cell was not completely, it was a complete mystery until 1950s. And since the 50s, into the 60s, into the 70s, and the 80s, as science came more and more advanced, we get to the point of knowing that a protein is an enzyme. An enzyme mediates a chemical reaction in our physiology. If you look at the uniqueness of that protein, the probability of that protein assembling itself, making that enzyme, it's one chance in zeros from here to like 3 neighborhoods over. It's just improbable as anything. So here's a little nice diagram to help you with a cell. Okay, here's the outer cell membrane, the nucleus with the genetic information in there. That's the information center, and it's driving all of the processes out in the cell. So you have proteins that are enzymes, or the molecular machine I'm going to show you, doing the functions that are allowing you to be here and to function as a living being. There's another comparison of technological advancement over time. So remember, I don't fault Darwin for some of the things he thought, because he didn't have a very wide view. It was kind of narrow. So Van Leeuwenhoek back in the 1670s invented the light microscope. So if you take a little drop of pond water and put it in a piece of glass, you put it here on the stage, you shine some light on the mirror, goes through the stage, goes up through the optics, and you can take a look at it, and you magnify, oh, you know, maybe it's a little paramecium floating around in there, swimming around in a drop of water. You might magnify it 150 or 300 or maybe up to 500 times, but that's about the end of it. Well, from the 1670s until about the early 1900s, light microscopes. Then they got more sophisticated light microscopes, some pretty cool ones actually, but because of electronics and vacuum pumps and computers, oh, I was going to say, take a look at what's in there. How does the microscope work? I mentioned that. What technologies have advancement brought over time? Again, electronics, vacuum pumps and whatnot, and you get an electron microscope, and this is what I used at Harvard. I also used it in my master's degree and also my doctorate program as well. But there, up at the top of this column, there's a little filament like an electron, like a light bulb filament. And when you turn it on, it emanates, it projects electrons, and the electrons can flow down through here because that's all in a vacuum. And you take your little specimen, which is a itty bitty teeny little thing, cut very, very thin and preserved, and you put it into a specimen holder here. Electrons go through, comes down, and there's a phosphorescent plate down here, and you can see the image of what you're looking at. And now you're talking about hundreds of thousands of times of magnification. If you see something fun, which I did from time to time, you flip up the phosphorescent plate, and underneath it's a camera, and you get a picture. So this is what Darwin could see. These are plant cells that have been stained, and you can see the nucleus. They all assumed back in the 1800s they were looking at cells made of goo, but I know you're not goo. In an electron microscope, you get ultra-fine detail. I could talk about this for a long time, but if you can just see, this is a very general view. This has got a lot of specific detail. You got the take-home message. If you want to know where the nucleus is, it's right here. This is a plant cell, so there's a green chloroplast here, here, and here. But the character we're going to talk about, the powerhouse of the cell, is a mitochondrion, and it's this little oval guy right here. And there are about 10 to 20 mitochondria in each cell. This is the powerhouse. If you think of a factory, these guys are the machines that make proteins. Here's the nucleus where all the information is. Here's the mitochondrion. It's dubbed the cell's powerhouse, and it has the energy packing machine. That's the molecular machine I'm going to show you. So let's get a little better picture here. So this is a real big blow up, so you can see. We can get real fine detail in an electron microscope. There's these inner membranes and an outer membrane. The artist here gets it a little easier for us to see. Think of it like a kidney bean shape, but inside is this other membrane that's very convoluted in and out. And the machine I'm going to show you sits right on this inner membrane. Okay, and that's the machine. I need to tell you a little bit in advance so you can watch the video and hear what the person, the narrator is saying. So you have a structural stalk. You have some parts here that flap back and forth. You have an axle. There's sort of a motor inside of here and a motor down here. And this motor is embedded in that membrane, okay? So this motor rotates, and it moves this axle, which moves these parts back and forth. And when it does that, some of the chemical constituents that go in here that need to be bound together are forced together, and that's what happens. So what we need to do is, we'll look at a molecule, and then I'll give you a real general diagram so you get it very easy. So ATP is the energy molecule. It's adenosine triphosphate, and that's the chemical structure. But Todd's easy to understand structure is, think of a locomotive and 3 boxcars, okay? Adenosine is the locomotive, and the 3 boxcars, you have them coupled together. So these little yellow squiggles are energy bonds. So when the energy is packed into this molecule right here, it can go out into your cell, and it can break this apart, and when it breaks it apart, the energy now is available to help your sight, your muscles move, your diaphragm to make you breathe. All that energy is used for metabolism and everything. Then when this is done breaking up, these parts end up going back to the machine and get repackaged together, and the energy gets restored in this place right here, and then it can go back out in the cell. And it goes around and around and around. Now, if we were to measure all of these, the weight of all of these remade molecules, it would add up to about 60 kilograms in a day for you. I know you don't make 60 kilograms and it adds up. It's recycling, but it's a way of understanding how much of that recycling is going on. Oh, by the way, 60 kilograms is 132 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
That's almost the weight of some of you, or just about there. So it's pretty amazing. And the number of molecules that are going through this cycle, it's just blindingly fast in all of you. It's just amazing.
That's why I can't lose weight. Yeah, too
All
much
right.
energy stuff.
So here's a presentation. It's from a YouTube video, and what I really want you to get out of this mostly is the motion. But you'll be able to follow some of the description pretty well. He'll be a little bit more technical in naming the parts, but that's really all there is to it. He will talk about protons. You'll see little bouncing balls down here going through a channel. By the way, those protons, are little hydrogen atoms, they're generated by another cycle of reactions. So this motor needs that functioning. Oh, by the way, a part that contributes to another part, it's kind of like a robot. You got one part that needs to be there for the other part, or the springs and the gears in a watch. You just don't have the motor all alone. It's related to all these other things going on. All that unified together makes you what you are. So let's see.
Life requires energy. The universal biological fuel is a molecule called ATP, or adenosine triphosphate. ATP stores chemical energy in the form of a high-energy phosphate bond. As the name suggests, it consists of an adenosine ring with a chain of 3 phosphate groups attached. The last of these phosphates can be split off to release the energy within the bond, resulting in adenosine diphosphate and free inorganic phosphate. This energy is needed to keep cells alive and is used from processes from muscle contraction to producing the thoughts your brain is having right now. The hydrolysis of ATP can be reversed by the addition of inorganic phosphate to ADP. However, this of course requires energy and is performed by a molecular power generator called ATP synthase. Here we see an atomic model of F1-FO ATP synthase sitting in a membrane. This molecular motor is found in the mitochondria of eukaryotic cells and is responsible for making most of the ATP. Mitochondria, the powerhouses of the cells, turn over around 60 kilograms of ATP every day in an adult person. A long chain of biochemical processes convert the energy stored in food into a proton gradient across the inner mitochondrial membrane. These protons drive a rotation of the turbine within ATP synthase, resulting in the synthesis of ATP. Like all generators, ATP synthase consists of 2 separate motors coupled together. Within the membrane, we have the FO motor, named after the binding of antibiotic oligomycin, and at the top we have the F1 motor from factor 1. The FO motor is a proton-powered motor. It is thought that protons flow through a channel open to just the intermembrane space where they bind to a ring of protein subunits, rotate 360 degrees, and exit through another channel exposed only to the matrix. The net flow of protons driven by the proton motive force provides the energy for the generation of rotation. The torque generated in the FO motor is transferred to the F1 motor by a central stalk or shaft. The F1 motor is responsible for generating the ATP by addition of phosphate to ADP. The top of the central stalk acts similarly to a camshaft, so that as it rotates within the F1 motor, it causes conformational changes of the catalytic subunits. The catalytic unit is made of a dimer of subunits, and there are 3 of these arranged in a ring. Catalysis occurs at the interface between the dimers. If we concentrate on one dimer, we can observe 3 distinct states. First, ADP and phosphate bind to the catalytic site. The central shaft then rotates 120 degrees to rearrange the molecules. Next, the enzyme undergoes a further 120-degree rotation, and the ADP and phosphate are fused together to create ATP. The enzyme then rotates again to return to the starting position, where ADP is released and ADP and phosphate can be bound for the next cycle of catalysis. One key aspect of this relationship is that catalytic subunits must remain stationary with respect to a rotating central shaft. This task is performed by a scaffold on the outside of the complex, referred to as the peripheral stalk. Recent work has shown that what was once thought of as a rigid scaffold is actually dynamic and is able to accommodate the changes necessary for most efficient function. Looking at this machine in its natural environment by electron chromatography of intact mitochondria has shown that ATP synthase dimerizes to shape the mitochondrial inner membrane into their signature cristae shape. This turbocharges ATP synthesis by focusing the proton gradient near ATP synthase.
See, not only are you a material being, you're turbocharged. Now I know that's kind of technical, but if you did watch the things in motion and you got the idea that the protons are fuel makes the motor go. The thing is, he didn't talk about intelligent design. He didn't talk about the fact that if you were to have any abnormality in the shapes of those proteins, the motor wouldn't work. If one of the axle proteins just happened to be missing, this wouldn't work. You go back to the analogy of the watch. You need all these parts and all these relationships. You need the information to make all these in the nucleus. Where did the information come from? The other thing that you have to figure out is how does this all assemble to get inserted in the membrane? But the point is, because of electron microscopy and some various other techniques that allow them to vision things, they're able to do these models. And this is what science has been able to do, and this really flies in the face of Darwinian evolution. So again, there's no evidence that this molecular machine could have ever evolved. It's intricate, it's not random. It's inferences and intelligence is required to design something like this. I wrote a kind of a letter to a friend at work, and I went through all of this information, and I said, this is proof that, that we're carbon-based robots. And actually, there's a similar structure in other organisms. And if you think of it as a design feature that can be moved around, it's generating life in many different places. So it's complex and all the parts are required, or else it's non-functional. Like I said, irreducibly complex. And each protein, each part is a protein that's specific and highly improbable. And the improbability of it is a topic for another presentation. Because if I calculate all the numbers and give you a description of how proteins come together, it might take 15 minutes in general language, but it's very much an impressive description. So I'm at the summary point. Again, molecular machines. This one packages chemical energy. It's in you and it's dependent to keep you going. Bobby wouldn't be up 20,000 steps without it. Highly complex specific proteins, parts of the machine, 2 motors, a support stalk, an axle, all those things are required. And again, viewing the machine's motion demonstrates how sophisticated the design really is. Again, an irreducible complexity, one missing part, no function. All parts must be assembled for function. Specificity beyond chance and randomness, again, reflects design. And no evidence exists for Darwinian evolution. No stepwise development could attribute to this. It's really all or none. And again, design reflects the complex. Information reflects an intelligence. Now, is this the only example? No, there are many. I had to put this little diagram in here because I said bacterial flagellum, and my wife goes, "Are they going to know what that is?"
Of course.
Actually, there's a little motor here,
Yep.
and it's the same as that molecular machine I showed you, and this wiggly thing is the flagellum that gives the bacteria motion through fluid. And if you read a description of it, this is just as amazing as that machine. The blood clotting system in your veins is also irreducibly complex. Immune system is incredibly complex, and just really begs the question of how that could have ever evolved. Enzymes, again, I mentioned, there are 1,300 different types of enzymes in you, and they're all incredible. So you're 1,300 times over incredible, okay?
I knew it.
Many idea examples are timeless, not evolutionarily explained, and science-based. That counters evolution. And not everyone's going to accept that, but it's getting through to some people. There's a museum in Germany where the museum curator put a balances in the display case, and he had some ID books, intelligent design books, and he had all these other books on, evolution and stuff, and then he read one, and he goes, "Oh my goodness," he had to change it. He couldn't put that design, that evolution display on display because it just couldn't. Again, they're vital questions. What's the source of information? What is life's origin itself? One of the speakers at Yale back in 2000 went through all the different scenarios people had for first chemistry to bring life. And he published a book, and actually I have a copy of it on my website. I have permission for people to download it. You go through all the scenarios, and they run into problems, every one of them.
Yep.
So, again, perspectives. You can take these different perspectives and bring them together, and that information can help you to support an apologetic from the standpoint of science and faith as well. And we do live on a fine-tuned planet, and information and life produces unique features. Science points to life's complex designs. Again, this is sort of repetitive. Information and life processes is unique. It produces unique features. Science data points to life's complex designs. Irreducible complexity. Darwin's evolution is a proposal that fails to explain. A mind, a designer's intelligence is the source. And for all that is created, Adonai is creator, and he is before all things, and in him all things are held together. So, living in the midst of the glory of God's design. And I really shouldn't show this because my wife wants to go back here. This is Wanaka, New Zealand, and that's what you see across the lake. So, within the realm of this, I don't know how long I went. I actually went a full hour and a half, so I've spent my whole time. I didn't practice this enough, so I thought I was going to do it in an hour, but I went a little slower, I think, than my practice.
That's okay. I want you to explain some things like differences that they've discovered now. Like, remember they used to say that humans and chimpanzees were like 99% the same, but show how as we've become more scientific, and if we follow the science, the real science, not the political science.
We were talking about this earlier. Mark was talking about a book that talks about chimps and humans being 99.9 similar. I heard a talk maybe 10 years ago that went down to 95%, and a more recent talk from one of the conference, the intelligent design conferences, it's more down like 80%. Yes, there are a lot of common things in metabolism of plants and animals. Use those as modular units of design that go in to describe physiology. But I will digress, and I will say, so we watched a video of a creationist, and we watched a video from the Intelligent Design Conference in Dallas, and both of them looked at human evolution, And the one thing that came out of both talks, and the latter talk was really good because it looked a lot at the literature, is someone comes out in the news, oh, we found another ancestor of the human race, this proves evolution. And then Dr. Luskin was saying, read the other science articles that come out in the following years. Oh, there's a problem here, there's a problem there. Oh, you can't make that conclusion. So science can correct misimpressions that come out. And you know, so again, it takes a closer look.
But as you were saying, man has evolved in micro or macro evolution. We have evolved in our as human beings, but we never came from a different species to become human beings.
Turn it around.
Okay.
Darwin is macroevolution.
Okay.
You start with a single ancestral life form, and that branches out, okay, and gives you all these different ones. Microevolution would be like Darwin's finches. Darwin went to Galapagos Islands, he collected some finches. He didn't watch them over time. Doctors Grant and Grant, two scientists, retired, went to the Galapagos one season, went back the next season, went back the next year. The Galapagos Islands are subject to difference in weather, environment, okay? The library of information in those finch birds is enough that they noticed that when they would go back years, they got wetter and wetter. The beaks of the finches changed to be shorter and they could eat fresher berries and stuff. When it got drier and drier, the beaks got longer and sharper. And the plumage changed. Oh, we got one species going to this species. Okay, we got a new species. Oh wait, a few years later, they went back to that species we saw over here. Basically, it's the pendulum swings. God has given life the ability to adapt on a micro time scale, not the macro time scale. So, and I find that really quite fascinating. It allows us to think about, Dr. Behe, one of the intelligent design speakers who's done a lot of interesting writings, he talked about a lake in Africa, and there's, I forgot, it's a chiclet or whatever the name of the fish is. You go and you look at the history and you think of, it was being populated by a small group of that fish, and over time, they see fish have evolved to occupy various niches in the lake. Some live in the bottom, some live in shallow water, some have bright colors, some have darker colors, but they all go back to that original library of the original population of fish.
Same thing with dogs, right? I mean, you have all these different dogs today, but I think even in the AKC website, it tells you they came from wolves, great wolves.
Well, this is the thing. So that canine library, yeah, you could go back to a wolf. But like I said before, Darwin used dogs as an example of change over time and evolution. But those changes in the pedigrees, all generated by the human mind, right?
And they're still all dogs. They didn't change from dogs to cats
Right.
or to pigs, but they've always been dogs.
Right, absolutely. You had a question?
How do you explain Cro-Magnon man?
Cro-Magnon man?
Yeah, what is he as it relates to men?
I'm going to allow us to come back to that question at a later time. That's not an area that fits in with this. I will just say that from the recent talks about hominid species, just remember, the Bible tells us in Adam and Eve were a special creation. It doesn't mean there weren't other hominid species that have lived on the earth. So there's some evidence for, you know, various things. But the one thing that was interesting about Dr. Luskin's talk was they're finding more commonality. So it almost means like, well, maybe they're all more Homo sapiens than they are different groups. So that's an area where science really needs to ferret stuff out more, and they may well actually come back around. I'll digress for one moment. I've been going to annual meetings for American Association of Advancement of Science, and those would be a lot of secular scientists speaking. And there's a Dr. White from Berkeley. He's a human evolutionist. And I sat in one of his talks back in the early 2000s, and he talked about there's this rift region in Ethiopia where they find fossils. And he's talking about how it's a prime place, and they find these fossils that are really kind of incomplete, really. But he wants to have a human evolution out of that. He says, yeah, but when you go to the edge of the Rift Valley, you know, the conditions aren't that good for finding these fossils anymore. And I'm sitting there going like, are you kidding me? Like, there's a lot of evidence out there you can't find because conditions aren't right. So you're basing a story on this one little geographical area. Wake up, dude. There's more than you can see from that alone. You got blinders on. So, and he's traditionally banging the drum of human evolution. But if you look at what Dr. Luskin was talking about in the talk 2 weeks ago, he says that literature sort of brings you all back home. In fact, Casey Luskin was a lawyer who joined the Discovery Institute. He went to South Africa for 4 years and got a geology degree. And he says there's a museum down there that has a lot of human fossil remains or skeletal remains, and it's a really good library of information down there. And my daughter, who went to South Africa for a summer school course at her college, they went to a reserve, but they actually visited that same site. And she says, yeah, it's quite an incredible museum. But that's an aside. I think there are some areas of science where science still needs to work things through. But when you go from a light microscope to an electron microscope, you go from simple structure to detailed structure. And then the molecular advances that give us a story about the machine, that really does come down to a fine point. And I think that's why I wanted to share that with you. And the fact that you all have it in you. You all have that apologetic in you. We're all God's carbon-based robots. Which, by the way, as a robot being, spirituality is separate from this material being, right? I sat across from a scientist Dr. Newsom, who's a neuroscientist from Stanford. I was at a meeting and a group of Christians got together for a dinner, and I asked him, I said, is the mind really totally in the brain? I didn't tell him I worked in a neuroscience department. I looked at a lot of images of things that were structural, but I'm not actually convinced. I think your brain is a transceiver. That your brain is a transceiver to something spiritual outside the body. And until they can convince me that all the memory and everything's in here, the brain's very complex. And it does integrate with relating to knowledge or understanding and memory. But I'm not sure it's all in there. So I asked him, and he stirred his martini with 3 olives and looked at me and evaded the answer that I wanted to give. So, one last question. Anybody else have a question?
Have you read Switch on Your Brain by Carolyn Leaf?
No, I haven't. There's a...
It's just amazing how your attitude, she goes, your attitude can actually change your brain.
Oh.
And it's
It gets into a different area.
it's amazing, and it's very scientific, and I'm reading it, I've read it once, and then reading it again with somebody that's more scientific.
Well, microevolution of the human species, we have different skin color, we have different, ethnic things that we relate to, and yet we're all from that original source of information, the library. And there is some differences in brain structure. So the Japanese, we always think of them being very, very meticulous, and a lot of them predominantly have brains that are sort of geared in some sense that way. I don't have that kind of talent, and maybe my brain is just different, developed a slightly different way. But
she's showing that the DNA could be changed in your brain. The DNA could change.
yeah, there is something called epigenetics. So you have the DNA information, and on that there are some molecules that sit that actually can influence whether things are turned on or off. And if you're exposed to chemicals and you have progeny and their progeny, some of that epigenetic influence can be carried along. It's not the core information, but it's an influence sitting on that information. So yeah, it's very incredible. I could go on, but I think we'll conclude.
Let's give Dr. Todd a hand. Yeah, I mean, you have to understand that there is a creator and there is intelligent design, because if there wasn't, you wouldn't get such a handsome, red-bearded little Jewish boy. So we have to understand that he's made all of us this way. But we're all human beings, but we're all different. So it's not like we're just one production. There are differences in our DNA that keep us human, but also at the same time allow us to look different so we can tell each other apart. Mark's DNA didn't get eyebrows, so, that's just how things work. I didn't get height,
I did. I got it all.
You got the height that I was supposed to get.
I know.
But in order to believe in evolution and in just, slime plus time equals man, you'd also have to believe that a tornado would go through a junkyard and make a 747. And that's impossible to even believe.
I was gonna say.
You can't even, again,
That ain't happening.
it's not happening. When we look around the world and we see all the things that are here and how they work together, we obviously know there was an intelligent designer. And that designer we know to be our God. Okay? So did anyone online have any questions? Were they asking anything? Okay. So things are going to be happening this Saturday at Mishkan. You ready?
Double click that thing in the center.
Yeah, I had it open, dear.
They overrode you, Todd. It's okay.
Oh, okay, I'm not doing that.
No, you're not doing it. You're fine.
Yeah, that's fine.
So Saturday we have services, 6 p.m. What Shabbat is it?
First.
Numero uno, which means what?
Movie.
Movie night, if we can get it connected. But it is movie night, and it was a special request movie, so that's what we're watching this week. I'm trying to see if it's going to come up.
Try it again.
Hang on a second. Be patient. We got 20 minutes. We're good. We got plenty of time.
You might have to I would reboot the computer and just reconnect again.
Oh, I did only take an hour, okay.
But I did have a question. You said as scientific discoveries continue, we continue discovering more, looking at things on a smaller and smaller scale. Is your feeling is the more of that science that is uncovered, the ground that evolution stands on is getting shakier and shakier? In other words, does the evidence take you away from evolution, or is there anything that's really pointing you toward evolution?
Well, I would say, okay, so in 2004 at Biola University, I'm walking around between sessions, and I'm walking up behind some of the speakers and I'm listening. And they were hoping at that point that their approach to presenting intelligent design would knock the legs out from under evolution. The problem is you're dealing with society, you're dealing with education systems. By the way, the original education systems in universities come out of Christian roots. There are scientists like Boyle and Kepler and Newton that were believers. And that people have lost sight of those kinds of things. So I would say that there's less and less to support evolution. I didn't want to bring it up, but there are scientists who believe in what's called theistic evolution. They want to believe in God, and they want to believe in Darwin's evolution. And one of our conferences was about theistic evolution and how it does not work, because we've knocked the legs out from underneath it. So I think that, like Dr. Evelyn says, we're finding more and more reasons to understand fine-tuning, not only of the earth, but the universe. And people listen to that, they have to be objective. So, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
No, I was told back in school, like most of you, that evolution was fact, right? And they would tell us, oh, we've got skeletons that show us going from monkey to man. And then I would find out that, Lucy, they found one little teeny foot bone. And from that, they built the whole understanding that this was the missing link between man and monkey. I'm like, no, see, that's just not happening. That's not true. It's not how it works. So again, we have no evidence of evolution. You have a lot of theory, but you have no evidence of evolution. Where we obviously have evidence of intelligent design. And if there's an intelligent designer, there's only one person who's been able to intelligently design this entire universe and everything in it, and that would be God himself. It's the only mind that is, his ways are not our ways, his thoughts are not our thoughts. It's big enough that he can do this directly. So, yes, there is a God, and I'll remind you, it's who you know that determines where you go. Okay? I know that's true because it's on the back of my t-shirt. I'm not kidding. Who you know determines where you go. That would be, like Romans 6:25 or 6:23?
623.
Yeah, so it's all true. And pray for my father, because he's a physicist who doesn't believe that there's a God. In fact, he says that 60% of scientists don't believe in God and the other 40% are not scientists. So he would think that Dr. Todd wouldn't be a natural scientist because Dr. Todd believes in God. It's amazing. So we're having just a little technical blip here, but it'll be taken care of in just one short minute. But yeah, so Saturday we start services at 6 p.m. We're having a guest speaker, someone from a time zone, not our own, someone from a time and place that we wish we could have been. That time and place was the days of Yeshua, days of Jesus. So he's going to come here. He's coming in on, what was that, Back to the Future's car, coming in on the DeLorean. And he's going to be giving a special talk of what happened back then and what he remembers as he interacted with Yeshua directly.
I would say turn off the TV and turn it back on, dear.
Yes, dear, thank you.
It's over here.
Who's the guest speaker?
Who's the guest speaker?
Yeah, for,
We don't know exactly.
oh, we don't.
Well, I don't want to give it away.
Oh,
I want y'all to be surprised.
okay.
Is it gonna be over the internet?
No, he's going to be here. If he's going to travel through time after spending time with Jesus, he's going to come here in person. Come on.
You got a time
No,
machine.
no,
What do you
I'm
think this
saying,
can do?
Are we gonna put it on Facebook? Is
Yeah.
what you're asking?
Yes, it'll be on Facebook. It'll be on the regular.
Yeah.
So
Well,
some people are gonna be in North Carolina, you know.
and I don't wanna be, but there's something that needs to be done.
you know, transporting guns across state line. No.
No guns are going with me this time.
But yes, we'll have our regular service. I know last week we didn't broadcast the Passover Seder, and I'm sorry you guys missed it. We had a great time. It was just a beautiful time of worship and of getting to know more about Jesus in the Passover and the Passion. And you know, it only comes once a year, so you got to make that effort to get yourselves here. We are going to have Bible study again with the Bible study that's coming up because of the sensitive nature of it. If you're not gonna come to the sanctuary personally, you can hear the first part, which will be the lecture part. But then we can't show the video because we don't have rights to the video to show it on the internet. And so that once the lecture part is over, we'll have to cut the transmission from Facebook, and you'll miss the video and you'll miss the discussion part. So you really want to come in person for Bible study from now on for the next 12 weeks as we go through Experiencing God. It is a vital class. It is the thing that made me go from religion to relationship. And that's important because before, when I had just religion, I didn't have salvation. And I thank God I wasn't killed in the first 15 years of my religious experience because I probably, though I thought I was a believer, and I may have been at the very bottom rung of faith, Experiencing God is the class that took me across the finish line to really knowing who God is, what my relationship with Him is, how He speaks to us, how He interacts with us. It's just a phenomenal teaching. So don't miss that. If we have the books, if you were on the list, I've ordered your books. They're here. If you did not put your request down, get to Amazon quickly and get your book. You need the workbook. Yes, darling.
I can't find my book. We'll talk.
Also in the back, Herta wants me to mention there's matzah. If you need a box of matzah to get you through this week.
All right, we are having technical difficulties that are just not working.
I don't know why.
Yeah, I'll fix it.
All right, anyway.
Would you
I'm so sorry.
sit the laptop
I'll
here,
set the laptop on the table and
unplug everything, plug it back up the way it was.
There's actually a thank you, Dr. Todd video that we had. I mean, you know, the thing that we had, but.
To me.
Yes, Mitch.
Who's the author of the book?
The TV's off,
Henry Blackaby.
everything's plugged in.
Henry Blackaby is the author of Experiencing God, and it's a great series. Again, I've taught it several times, and each time I teach it, people's lives just change. Not because of me, but because they allow the Holy Spirit to work within them, and they grow and mature in faith. It's just a phenomenal study. And even if you've already taken it, as you mature in faith and you go back and take it again a year or two, several years later, 10 years later, you realize something. Your walk with God has made your answers completely different than they were the first time. So it's definitely worth doing even if you've done it previously. We did this 6 years ago when Mishkan first started. We did this, okay? And it's been 6 years. So it's time to do it again. We have some new people in here. Some people have never had it. And so we want to make sure that we give this an opportunity. If you don't plan on doing this study with us, I don't know what you're gonna do for the next 12 weeks. I don't know what you'll do, but that's what's going on for the next 12 weeks.
Okay, so he's got 4 tires and a spare.
So sorry, I got
Hit,
the wrong
hit the,
source now.
yeah, hit the input thing.
Yeah, there you go, hit that one. There you go. Okay, we're back, you should be able to come up now, Mark.
Okay,
Do you have any sound on that?
I'm waiting till this is done.
Do you have any sound on what you're trying to display? Okay, thank you, because I turned it way down.
Did you leave a note up here? Oh, that's how to do it right there.
That's my emergency instructions.
Okay. We're gonna pray for Greta's father. He's going through some things. Greta sent a prayer request for her father. Were there any other prayer requests this week that people wanted to pray since we have time to do some prayer now, including that this will work? Raul? Yes, Lucy's brother-in-law, Raul, had a, I'll let you do it, had a stroke, and it was a small stroke, but a stroke nonetheless.
He's back in the hospital.
He's back in the hospital. Mishkan HaShafar has given him a wheelchair and some other things that he needed to help him out at home. Again, if you have a need for medical equipment, let Mishkan know, because we do have access to medical equipment that we can help people out with their needs locally in the area. I'm not talking about in Tennessee and some other places where we're being watched every week. But, all right, so, no? Yes? No? Mitch?
Yeah, I'll be going to a sleep study to help figure out what's going on with my sleep apnea.
Okay.
All right. It has to be back on that screen, that opening screen. We can try.
Yeah.
Trying to turn off the Apple TV because she'll.
We've never had that many problems.
We get,
There you go. Got your Apple
What's
TV
the
screen.
spelling of, is it Henry Blackaby?
Blackaby, yes. Blackaby. Blackaby. Blackaby.
A-B-Y, okay.
If this doesn't come up, I will just tell you the name of the movie and what it's about. But,
Oh, here comes a thank you.
yay! How many Gentiles did it take to run to change a light bulb? Yes, so thank you, Dr. Todd and little Nita. And Nemo. Nemo's coming right now.
I did swimmingly well.
So this is our movie that's going to be here Saturday.
Go ahead and turn the sound up here.
It's up.
the devil's arithmetic.
So it's called The Devil's Arithmetic, and basically it starts off with a family gathering for their Passover celebration. And this young girl is just not interested in anything Jewish at all. She's not interested in her history. She's not interested in what her grandparents went through or anything else. And she basically ends up being transported in time back to Nazi Germany. And what happened, and I don't want to give the whole story away, but she meets a lot of people in the concentration camp that she gets put into, and what happens. And it's just a really good movie. But she definitely didn't want anything to do with her faith and her ethnicity and her culture. And then after experiencing what her grandparents went through and what other Jews of that day went through, she has an epiphany of things. So it's a very good movie, and of course it comes with free popcorn, which is, of course, important. That's the only reason Mark comes. And I know a lot of Ashkenazis are not eating popcorn during Passover, but it's Saturday night, so it'll be okay. And it doesn't have any leaven in it, it just pops, okay? It's not leavened. There's no leavening agent to make it pop. It's steam that makes it pop. So, but Passover's over anyway by Saturday night, so we'll be good, at least after dark. All right, and then we have Experiencing God starting, again, dinner and fellowship from 7 to 7:30, and the class will be promptly starting at 7:30, and we hope to be over by 9 each Tuesday night. There is a lecture portion, there is a video, and then there's discussion and how your week goes and preparing you for the following week, okay? Any questions about any of this stuff so far? No? Is there anything else you have on there, Mark?
That's it.
Okay.
Go back to the first slide, since I didn't have the camera focused on that, so our Facebook friends can see the Dr. Todd slide.
Oh, the Dr. Todd.
There you go.
There.
The Todd and Nita fish. Mark likes working with Photoshop, so just be careful.
Yes.
I just caution you that if you let him take video of you, you don't know how it'll be used.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right, Michigan movers?
Oh, yeah.
Just remember, if you're friends with a pastor or married to a pastor, you will be the subject of a sermon
Yes.
or more. So it's just how we roll. Okay. So we're gonna pray and leave out of here. I mean, you don't have to leave. You can stay all night if you want. I got to go to food pickup, so you can stay all night if you want. But let's go to the Lord in prayer. Were there any prayer requests from no? Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us on Facebook as well. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Avinu Malkeinu, our Father and our King, Lord, we're lifting up those things that are on our hearts, our minds, and our souls, and our spirits. We thank you, Father, for your intelligent design, that you've given us brains that, though they are complex, they are simplistic enough that we can learn the truth from your scriptures, we can see it applied in the universe, and we can come to faith, for the heavens declare your majesty. Father, we lift up Greta's dad. We ask that you would be with him as he's going through some testing and some other medical procedures. Father, we're praying for Raul as he's back in the hospital. He had a stroke, Father, and he needs to go to rehab. He needs to have some things. We're praying for him and for those taking care of him. Father, we're praying for those who have heart prayer concerns on their minds but haven't raised them tonight. So, Father, we ask that you be with all of our people and you protect us and guide us, direct us, Father, and prepare us, Lord. Prepare us to come on Saturday to meet with a person who met your son. Prepare us to come on Tuesday to start a new relationship with you, one that makes us a true disciple and not just a believer. And, Father, watch over the flock as they're going through their week and give them opportunities to serve you and to witness you as they worship you. And we thank you for all that you're doing, Lord, in the precious name above all names, the name Yeshua. Amen.
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 So we'll see you guys Saturday night. We start at 6 o'clock. Doors open at 5:30. Yes, Deanna?
So do we need to do anything prior to Tuesday?
Keep breathing.
No, I mean, there's nothing we need to read before we come.
No?
Okay.
We'll take care of it. We'll start on Tuesday.
Okay.
All right? Arrivederci. Adios. Lila Tov. Paka. It always sounds like a crow screaming at me.
They do.
I saw a documentary on